Okay, so picture this. You're all set to, dive into this amazing underwater world, right? Sun's out, water's clear, and then just casually, you overhear another diver mentioning something about a stiff regulator.
Uh-huh.
You're like, yeah, it's just a small thing, nothing to worry about. Would you be cool as a cucumber, or would that send, like, chills down your
Oh,
spine?
I can already feel that little knot of tension.
Right.
It's interesting you bring that up because we're diving into, no pun intended, a diver training manual today. And this whole idea of seemingly small details having huge implications underwater is really at the core of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
On land, a stiff regulator, yeah, might be a little annoying. But underwater, 30 meters down, you need to breathe. And suddenly, your life depends on this thing that's not cooperating. It's a completely different story.
It's like that saying, right? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, but in diving, it's like amplified.
Totally. And that's where the psychological aspect comes in. Because this manual, it doesn't just focus on the physical risks of diving, but also dives into, the mental and emotional fallout of emergencies, specifically what's called critical incident stress.
And they actually use a really interesting example in the manual. They introduced this dive team, David, Maria, and Omar. They're all geared up, ready to descend. David, he's the one who overheard the conversation about the faulty regulator. So he flags it to the group. They have a little powwow, decide not to ignore it, again, highlighting how vital these small details are. But then the manual takes this turn. It shifts gears to talk about the psychological impact of all this.
Right, because even if they make the right call, even if the dive goes off without a hitch, that experience, that near miss, it can leave a mark.
Exactly. And the manual lists out all these symptoms of critical incident stress, some expected. Insomnia, nightmares, the things you'd expect after a stressful event. But then there are these curveballs, like sudden changes in appetite, withdrawing from friends, even an increase in dark humor. It's like, after my fender bender a while back, completely my fault. I was cracking jokes about it nonstop, even though deep down, I was pretty shaken up.
That's a perfect example of how this stress manifests, those seemingly unrelated symptoms. Like your dark humor. That's your brain's way of coping, of processing that overload of emotions, is trying to find a release valve.
Wow. So it's normal to feel a bit off after something like that.
In the short term, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's when those reactions linger, when they start to interfere with your daily life, your relationships, your work, that it might be a sign of something more serious.
So how do you know? Like, how do you differentiate between, like, your brain naturally working through it versus something that might need a bit more attention?
Self-awareness is key, right?
Yeah.
Paying attention to how you're feeling, how you're acting, and not hesitating to reach out for help if things feel off.
Okay, so what can someone do if they feel like, yeah, maybe this is more than just a passing thing?
Well, the manual specifically talks about critical incident stress debriefing. It's designed to create this safe space for people to connect with mental health professionals, and even more importantly, with each other, with people who've gone through similar experiences.
Right, because even just knowing you're not alone in those feelings can be so powerful.
Exactly. And through these debriefings, you can process those emotions, share your experience, and ultimately develop healthy coping mechanisms.
This makes me think that even though, most of us aren't strapping on scuba gear every day, we all encounter stressful, even traumatic situations in our lives.
Oh, absolutely. This deep dive into, diving emergencies, it's got these universal takeaways. Car accidents, a sudden illness in the family, a job loss, grief, loss. They can all trigger this kind of stress response. Those symptoms we talked about, they're not exclusive to divers. They're how our brains, signal distress.
It's a good reminder for all of us to be tuned in, not just to our own well-being, but also to those around us. We can't always dodge those curveballs life throws our way, but we can learn how to navigate the emotional aftermath.
Couldn't agree more. If anything we discussed today resonated, even if it's from a totally different experience, remember, you're not alone. Seeking help is not a sign of weakness at all. It actually takes a lot of strength to reach out.
If any of those symptoms we talked about struck a chord, maybe jot them down. It could be a starting point for some self-reflection. Remember, reaching out for professional support, there's absolutely no shame in that. It's a brave and important step towards healing.